Most people think they can look at somebody once and know exactly who they are. But that's where this story proves everyone wrong. Because before anyone at Crestwood High learned who Malik Jordan really was, they laughed at him. They whispered. They pushed him, mocked him, and treated him like he was invisible. What they didn't know was that they were playing with someone they should have feared from the start. Someone who carried more history, more discipline, and more power than any of them could imagine. And it all began on a quiet bus ride into a town that didn't feel ready for someone like him. The road into Willow Creek. A small town tucked between empty fields and fading street signs, stretched long and empty. Malik leaned against the window, his breath fogging the glass as the landscape rolled by. Everything looked different here. Slower, quieter, cleaner, almost too perfect. Like the town lived inside a snow globe nobody had shaken in years. It wasn't his first time being the new kid. But this one hit differently. His mother had taken a better job at a clinic, hoping this place would give them a fresh start. His uncle said it would be good for him. A new environment. Less trouble. More opportunities. But Malik knew something they didn't. Fresh starts don't come easy when people already think they know your story just by looking at you in Willow Creek. It wasn't the kind of town that welcomed a kid like him with open arms. The moment he stepped off the bus and walked through the gates of Crestwood High, felt it. Not in loud words or obvious actions, just in the silence. That heavy pause in conversations when he walked by, the quick glances that slid away the second he looked up, the tight smiles from teachers who were trying too hard to look friendly, voices careful, too careful, like they were afraid of saying the wrong thing. Malik had seen that look before. It followed him in every town they moved to. It whispered more about people's fears than anything he ever said. Still, he kept walking back straight, step steady because that was what he had learned to do. His uncle had drilled it into him since he was old enough to understand the world wasn't fair. Walk with purpose. Speak with intention. Never give anyone more reason to misunderstand you. His first few classes were fine. The teachers asked him basic questions. He answered quietly, and most students didn't bother him. But the stares didn't stop. They crawled across the room like tiny pricks under his skin. By lunchtime, the feeling had settled deep inside him. Not anger, not fear. Just awareness. A quiet alertness he'd grown used to. Like a muscle that never fully relaxed. He stepped into the cafeteria, holding a tray he didn't really want. The room was loud clusters of friends, talking, laughing, comparing homework, scrolling through their phones. Every table felt like it was sealed off by invisible walls. And then came the hook the moment everything silently shifted toward. What was coming? Malik scanned the room. Searching for an empty spot, already knowing the rules. Don't sit with a group that doesn't invite you. Don't force yourself into a conversation. Pick a corner, keep your head down, finish your food, move on. But today, there weren't any corners left. The only open seat sat across from a kid completely absorbed in his phone. Brown hair falling over his eyes, hoodie pulled tight around his shoulders. He didn't look up, didn't even seem to notice Malik approaching. Good. Maybe he didn't care. Malik set his tray down quietly. But before he could sit, a voice sliced through the noise-sharp light, dripping with cocky confidence. You new here, or what? Malik turned slowly. A blond kid with a relaxed smile leaned back in his chair. He wore his confidence like a jacket, comfortable, familiar, and unearned. 3 other boys beside him watched Malik like he was. Entertainment entering the stage, Malik took a breath and answered with as much calm as he could. Mustard didn't know I needed directions, just to sit. The blond kid chuckled, nodding like he appreciated the quick response. Just making sure, man. Not a lot of new faces in Willow Creek. Malik heard the unspoken part loud and clear. Not a lot of new faces that look like you. But he didn't react. He couldn't. He had learned long ago that every reaction created a story people used against him. The blond kid smirked wider. But behind the grin, Malik saw something else: curiosity. Maybe interest. Maybe challenge. Well, welcome to Crestwood, the kid said. Malik sat, picked up his fork, and focused on eating. But the message was already delivered. This wasn't the end. This was only the opening scene, because what started with harmless stares and whispers was about to unravel into something much deeper. Something heavier. Something nobody at Crestwood High was prepared for. Not the students. Not the teachers. And definitely not the boys who thought they could break him. The strange thing about a place like Crestwood High is that it never shows its true face on the first day. It waits. It watches. It tests you with small things first, like it's measuring how much you'll take before you finally push back. And for Malik, the tests started almost immediately. The first few comments were soft enough that a different person might have ignored them. Passing whispers in the hallway. A couple of snickers behind his back. Words spoken just loud enough to be heard but quiet enough to deny didn't know they let kids like him in here. Bet. He doesn't last long. Looks like he's already lost. None of it shocked Malik. He had heard worse in other places. From other faces wearing the same expression of casual superiority. He tried to brush it off, repeating the same reminder he'd carried since childhood. Don't react. Don't feed it. Just breathe. But trouble doesn't always come from whispers. Sometimes it arrives wearing a smile that's a little too bold and a name everyone knows at Crestwood High. That name belonged to Reed Lawson. Reed wasn't just popular, he was untouchable. His father owned half the businesses along Willow Creek's main road. His friends followed him like he wrote the rules. Quarterback, captain, golden boy of the town. People laughed at jokes that weren't funny simply because he told them. And from the moment he saw Malik that first day, Reed decided something. He decided Malik didn't belong here. And Reed was the kind of person who refused to let anything go once he made up his mind. Malik learned this the hard way at his locker 2 days. After the cafeteria incident, he was swapping out books. For his next class, focused, quiet, doing his best to stay out of the way. That's when a sudden shoulder slammed into his back, sending him stumbling into the metal door with a loud clang that echoed down the hallway. Oops, Reed said, voice dripping with fake innocence. Didn't see you there? Of course he saw him. Everyone did. But Malik kept his cool. He tightened his grip on his notebook, took a breath, and kept his movements slow and steady. No rush, no anger. Reed leaned against the neighboring locker, studying him. You're quiet, huh? A pause. A smirk. That's cool. Real cool. Malik met his eyes for the first time. Not angry. Not scared. Just looking. And that alone made Reed's smirk twitch just for a second. But it didn't end there. One of Reed's friends, maybe Liam, maybe Chase. They all looked the same to Malik, muttered something under his breath, causing Reed to regain his grin. Catch you later. New guy. They walked off, laughing like it was all just harmless fun. But Malik knew what this really was. It was the first strike. The first mark in a pattern that never ended well, and he was right. The next incident arrived in the cafeteria. Malik was carrying his empty tray toward the trash cans, minding his own business, when a foot shot out in front of him, not subtle. Not an accident. A trap placed right where he was about to step. His body jolted forward, but years of balance training kept him upright. He didn't fall. He didn't even stumble hard enough to look embarrassed. Behind him came laughter, a chorus of it. Reed lifted both hands. Palms out. Relax, man. It's a joke. Mike didn't respond. He didn't even turn his head. He simply stepped over Reed's leg and kept walking, calm and silent, like none of this mattered. More laughter followed him across the cafeteria. Too easy, someone muttered. His jaw tightened. For a brief second, he could hear his uncle's voice in his head. Steady and controlled. Lion doesn't flinch when the hyenas bark. Malik exhaled slowly and released the tension in his shoulders. He would let it go. He had survived worse. And if he kept calm, maybe, just maybe, they would get bored and move on. But Reed wasn't the type to get bored. He was the type to escalate, which is why the third time wasn't just another joke. It was after school. The hallways had emptied. The parking lot was half filled with students heading home or waiting for rides. Malik wasn't in a hurry. His mother wouldn't be home until late, and he liked taking his time, letting the day roll off him before walking into a quiet house. He stepped outside. Adjusting the strap of his backpack, that's when he heard it. "Hey, new guy." He barely had time to turn before something hard slammed into his back. A shock of force knocked him forward, and he staggered, nearly hitting the ground. Laughter exploded behind him. He straightened. Heart steady but blood warming with something deeper than irritation. He turned around slowly. Reed stood there with his crew, Liam, Chase, and two others Malik didn't recognize. Reed held a paper cup, now almost empty, the last drops of soda sliding down his fingers. "My bad," Reed said casually. "Didn't see you there?" The sugary drink soaked into Malik's hoodie, dripping down the fabric in sticky streams. Ice cubes hit the pavement around his shoes. The entire lot went quiet. Students nearby stopped packing their bags. Some froze halfway into their cars. Everyone watched, waiting for a reaction. Reed smirked at him. "Come on, man. Say something." Malik didn't. He stepped forward, ready to walk past him. That's when Reed shoved him. This time, it wasn't casual. It wasn't a joke. It was forceful, intentional, a push meant to provoke. Malik stumbled back a step but didn't fall. Didn't raise his fists. Didn't give Reed the satisfaction of seeing any fear. Reed laughed. "What, you scared?" Liam stepped closer, grin wide. "Nah, he's just soft." There it was, the spark they wanted, the one they were trying to drag out of him. Malik could almost hear his uncle again. "Keep your hands in your pockets. Stay calm. Don't give them what they want." But this time was different. Reed wasn't looking for laughs. He wanted to prove something. He wanted the whole school to see Malik break. Malik inhaled slowly. Then he dropped his backpack to the ground, and for the first time, Reed looked unsure. Reed's eyebrows lifted just a little as Malik squared his shoulders. And for the first time since this whole thing began, the air shifted. The crowd around them didn't move or speak, but you could feel the tension spreading through the parking lot like heat on metal. Malik didn't posture. He didn't raise his fists, or crack his knuckles, or stare anyone down. He simply stood there, steady and calm, like someone who had been pushed to the very edge of patience, and finally decided to stop stepping back. Reed let out a short laugh, but it didn't carry the same confidence as before. "Oh, you got something to say now?" But Malik didn't answer. He didn't need to. Reed took one step forward, chest puffed out, ready to deliver another shove, or maybe something worse. His friends leaned in, smirking, expecting a scene they thought they'd already won. That was all the space Malik needed. His movement was quick, clean and controlled, nothing wild or sloppy. A small shift of his feet, a faint motion with his left hand. Reed reacted the way every untrained person reacts when they think a punch is coming. He flinched. That tiny hesitation was everything. Malik's right hand drove forward, straight into Reed's ribs. The sound wasn't loud. The impact was deep. It's a kind of hit that folds the body before the mind has time to catch up. Reed's breath shot out in a broken gasp, his whole torso collapsing inward as the pain pulled his face into a silent scream. But Malik wasn't finished. He pivoted, grounding his weight, and brought an uppercut from below, sharp, precise. Reed's head jerked back, eyes rolling unfocused. His knees buckled, and the shock hit him too fast to even resist. He hit the pavement hard. Everything went silent. Liam, the others, they froze, stuck between disbelief and fear. No one dared step forward. No one dared speak. It was as if the entire parking lot forgot how to breathe. Malik took one step back, adjusting the hem of his hoodie. His breathing was steady, calm, almost relaxed. He wasn't shaking. He wasn't angry. He wasn't proud. He was just done. Reed groaned, rolling slightly on the ground like he didn't know where he was. The pain had scrambled everything inside him. Malik finally spoke, voice even and quiet. "You finished?" Reed didn't answer. He couldn't. Malik's eyes shifted to the others. "Anyone else?" Nobody moved. For the first time, They weren't looking at him like he didn't belong. They were looking at him like they finally understood who they were messing with. Malik picked up his backpack, slung it over his shoulder, and walked away without another word. Each step felt heavy, but steady, like he was leaving more than a fight behind him, like he was walking away from every decision people tried to force on him. But deep down, he knew it wasn't over. Fights like this don't end with the last punch. They ripple, they echo. And by the next morning, the echo had already reached every hallway of Crestwood High. When Malik walked into school the next day, he didn't need to check his phone for rumors. The looks people gave him told the whole story. Some stared with wide eyes like they were witnessing someone dangerous. Some nodded with quiet respect. A few whispered behind their hands, not daring to let him catch their gaze. And then there were those who watched him with something colder, something suspicious, something judging, as if one moment of defending himself was enough to rewrite his entire character. Reed wasn't at school. Malik expected that. Nobody comes back the day after being folded in front of the whole parking lot. Liam and Chase kept their heads down, walking quick. Avoiding eye contact like getting near Malik might burn them. He walked to class calmly, took his seat, pulled out his notebook, and acted like it was any regular school day. But the atmosphere around him carried weight. At lunch, conversations dipped when he passed through. People leaned in to whisper. Some freshmen he'd never spoken to stared at him with awe, like he had become a myth. Overnight, didn't know the new kid could fight like that, someone muttered. He gave Reed exactly what he deserved, another voice added. Heard Reed's not coming back all week. Alec ignored the noise. He wasn't interested in praise. He didn't want attention. He wasn't here to be anyone's hero, and definitely not their villain. He sat down with his tray, grateful for a moment of quiet, but quiet never lasts. From behind him, a voice slipped through the air, soft, but sharp enough to cut. He's just a violent kid trying to act tough. Malik turned slightly. A girl with straight dark hair and expensive jewelry sat at a nearby table. Her expression was wrinkled like she'd caught a smell she couldn't stand. She looked away the moment his eyes met hers. But the damage was already done. Malik's stomach tightened. Moments like this always played out the same. It didn't matter if he held back. It didn't matter if he walked away. It didn't matter if he defended himself only when pushed too far. People had already decided what they wanted to believe. But Malik didn't regret what happened. Reed had gone looking for a fight. Malik had given him exactly what he earned. Still, the weight of it lingered inside. Him, heavy, complicated, loud in the quiet parts of his mind. He had spent years learning control, training, holding himself back, doing everything he could to avoid being labeled. And yet here he was, fighting once, and suddenly becoming the story people always assumed he was. But he didn't yet know that this moment, this fight, wasn't the real turning point. The real shift was coming. And it wasn't going to be written by Reed or the rumors or anyone else. It was going to come from someone Malik didn't expect. The rest of the week felt strange, like the world had tilted just a few inches off its usual balance. Reed still hadn't shown up. His friends avoided Malik, like stepping near him might trigger another explosion. The whispers softened little by little, but something else quietly crept through the hallway's curiosity. Not the rude kind, not the judgmental kind, but something more cautious. Something wondering who Malik really was beneath everything people assumed. Even so, the air around him remained heavy, like everyone was waiting to see what he'd do next. And Malik felt that pressure with every step. He tried to focus on school, keeping his head down, keeping his voice low. But no matter how quiet he stayed, eyes were always on him. People watched him like he was a test they needed to solve. On Thursday afternoon, after gym, Malik stayed behind to put equipment away. The gym emptied out slowly, echoing with the last few shouts of students heading home. Malik wiped sweat from his forehead and headed toward the locker room when he heard a voice behind him. "Got a minute?" Malik paused. Coach Bennett stood at the doorway. Tall, solid, with the tired, gentle look of someone who had spent too many years dealing with teenagers and thought they knew everything. Malik wasn't sure if this was about the fight. maybe a lecture, maybe worse. But something about the coach's voice made him stop walking. They stepped outside, standing near the edge of the track where the football team was finishing practice. Shouts echoed across the field as players jogged drills, helmets glinting under the fading sunlight. "I heard what happened," Coach Bennett said. "The parking lot. The kid you dropped?" Malik stiffened. He didn't deny it, didn't confirm it, just waited. The coach nodded slowly, almost as if he respected the silence. "I'm not here to scold you," he said. "If anything, I'm sure you had your reasons." Malik exhaled softly. "He didn't give me much of a choice." "I know," Bennett replied. "Kids like Reed always push until somebody pushes back." He studied Malik for a long moment, one brow raised slightly. "You're a fighter, aren't you?" Malik shrugged, unsure how much to say. "I've trained since I was a kid. Boxing mostly." The coach let out a low whistle. "That explains the form. Hits like that don't come from nowhere." For the first time all week, Malik felt something strange. Not judgment, not caution, but respect. Still, Bennett wasn't done. "You're good," he said, "but let me ask you something important. Did that fight change anything?" Malik didn't answer right away. He looked out at the field, watching the football players crashing into each other with no fear of consequences. Everyone loved them, cheered for them, protected them. Meanwhile, his one moment of defending himself was being talked about like it revealed his entire character. Coach Bennett crossed his arms. "You think Reed learned something? Think the people watching did? Or did they just get a show to talk about?" Malik frowned slightly. He knew the truth. Reed wasn't the type to reflect. More likely, he was somewhere stewing, waiting to come back angrier. The others? Some respected Malik more now. Some feared him. And some, the ones like the jewelry girl, only felt more justified in their assumptions. "No," Malik whispered. "Nothing changed." "That's what I thought," Bennett said quietly. "See, people like Reed, they never really lose. Not in a way that sticks. He'll come back eventually. He'll run his mouth. He'll start something again. That's who he is." Malik clenched his jaw but stayed silent. "But you," the coach continued, "you're different. You've got control. Real control. You didn't hit him out of anger. You hit him because you had to." Malik finally looked back at the coach. There was no fear in Bennett's eyes. No judgment. Only certainty. "I've been talking with Coach Rivera," Bennett said. "The wrestling coach? He wants disciplined kids. The kind who know how to fight without losing themselves." He paused. "I think you'd be good for the team." Malik blinked. Wrestling? He'd never thought about it. Fighting for survival was one thing. Fighting for something purposeful felt completely different. Bennett smiled a little. "There's a difference between winning a fight and understanding your power. I've seen good kids get swallowed up by reputation because they let others define them. You don't have to be one of those kids." Malik didn't respond. His throat felt tight. And not from anger, from something that felt uncomfortably close to hope. "Think about it," Bennett said as he turned to walk away. "You already proved you're not someone to mess with. Now prove there's more to you than that." That night, Malik sat on the edge of his bed. His uncle's old boxing gloves hung on the wall. The padding was faded, the laces frayed, the leather cracked from years of sweat and effort. He touched the gloves gently, remembering all the warnings, the lessons, the hours spent learning how to move, how to breathe, how to control the storm inside him. He thought about all the times he'd walked away, all the times he'd held back, all the strength it took not to react. And the one time he let himself fight, he didn't regret it, but it changed everything. He wasn't afraid of Reed. He wasn't afraid of the rumors. He wasn't afraid of being new, but he was afraid of being trapped in a story. It wasn't his. A story others wrote for him. Maybe Coach Bennett was right. Maybe it was time to choose a different direction, a different purpose, a different reason to fight. Because strength wasn't just about fists or reflexes. Sometimes the hardest kind of strength was deciding who you wanted to become next, and Malik felt, for the first time in a long time, that he might actually have a choice. The decision didn't happen all at once. It never does. It started the next morning with Malik standing in front of the mirror in the bathroom, toothbrush in hand, staring at his own reflection. He studied the boy looking back at him. Brown skin, tired eyes, shoulders that held more weight than his age explained. Was he just the kid who knocked out the most popular guy in the parking lot? Was that really going to be his whole story here? Down the hall, Malik heard his mother moving around the kitchen. The smell of toast drifted in, the clink of a mug, the small sounds of a life trying to be normal. He rinsed his mouth, wiped his face, and made himself a quiet promise if he was going to be known for something. It wouldn't just be that one moment. At school, the stares had softened a little, but they hadn't disappeared. People still moved out of his way. Some nodded at him with a kind of distant respect, like they admired what he'd done from far away, but didn't want to get too close. He walked through the halls with the same calm he'd carried all week. But inside, something was shifting. After classes, instead of heading straight home, he found himself drifting back toward the gym. The squeak of shoes on the floor, the low echoes, the smell of sweat, all of it felt familiar in a strange but comforting way. He paused at the entrance. On the far side of the gym, a few students were rolling on mats. Bodies locked, legs tangled, trying to pin each other down. A short man with a whistle around his neck watched them closely, calling out small corrections. That had to be Coach Rivera. Malik didn't move at first. He watched quietly, hands in his pockets, trying to decide if he belonged here. Then someone noticed him. Jordan. Coach Bennett's voice came from behind him. Malik turned. The coach gave him a knowing look. Thinking about it, he asked. Malik shrugged. Maybe? Bennett nodded toward the mats. Rivera's not as scary as he looks. Rivera glanced over, saw them, and motioned for Malik to come closer. Malik's heart thudded once, hard. But he walked forward anyway. Rivera sized him up with one measured look. You're the kid who dropped Lawson, right? The question hung in the air. Malik could feel a few wrestlers pause just slightly, listening. Yes, sir, he said simply. Rivera nodded. No smile, no smirk. Just acceptance. You got balance. And control. Bennett says you've boxed. Since I was little, Malik replied. You ever wrestle? No. Rivera crossed his arms. Good. Means you don't have bad habits to break. There was a small ripple of laughter from the team. Not mean laughter. Just amused. Rivera gestured to the mat. Shoes off. Step up. You want to use what you've got for something real? You start here. If you're just here to hit people, you can leave now. Malik held his stare. I'm not here for that. Good, Rivera said. Because on this mat, strength isn't about who you can hurt. It's about who you can control, starting with yourself. That line sat inside Malik like a stone, dropping into water. Simple, direct, true. He stepped onto the mat. The first practice was rough. Wrestling was different from boxing. There was no distance. No room to dance around. Every mistake put him on his back. Every second demanded focus. It was tiring in a way he hadn't expected. But something about it felt right. Every time he slipped, he got back up. Every time he got pinned, Rivera corrected him instead of judging him. The team didn't treat him like a monster or a hero. It's just another kid learning. For the first time since arriving in Willow Creek, Malik felt something small, but real. He wasn't standing alone. Days passed. He practiced after school. He started learning new terms, new movements. Single leg, double leg, sprawl, bridge, escape. His body began to feel different. Stronger, but also lighter. Like the tension he'd been carrying for years was finally being reshaped into something useful. One afternoon, as he left the gym, sweat drying on his forehead, he stepped into the hallway and froze. Reed Lawson was back. He stood at his locker. Bruise fading along his jaw, his posture quieter than before. Some of his friends were around him, but their energy wasn't the same. They weren't as loud, not as bold. Their laughter dimmed when they saw Malik. For a second, the hallway shrank to just the two of them. Reed's eyes met his. Something flickered there: anger, embarrassment, maybe a thin layer of fear. For a moment, it looked like Reed was deciding between starting something and walking away. Malik could feel the old instinct rise. The part of him that was ready to defend, ready to react. But this time, something else stood beside it. The feel of the mat under his feet. Coach Bennett's voice. Coach Rivera's warning. So Malik did the one thing nobody expected. He walked right past Reed. No shove. No look back. No threat. Just a calm, deliberate choice. He wasn't avoiding him. He was choosing not to go back to that moment. Reed's hand twitched at his side, like he'd almost raised it and stopped himself. The boys around him stayed quiet. Nobody laughed. Nobody pushed. They just watched him go. And in that simple walk down the hall, something shifted again, this time in Malik's favor. Rumors didn't vanish. Some people still whispered. Some still held on to the image of him as the kid who knocked Reed out. But now, there was another story forming around him. The kid who joined wrestling, the one who trained hard, the one who didn't start trouble but finished what others forced on him. Weeks later, after his first small local match, Malik sat alone in the bleachers while the gym slowly emptied. He had one. It wasn't easy. He'd been taken down. He'd almost lost. But he'd fought smart. With discipline. With control. Coach Rivera clapped him on the shoulder as he walked by. Good work. That's how you fight for something. When he was finally alone, Malik leaned forward, elbows on his knees, breathing slow. He thought about the bus ride into town. The stairs on his first day. The push against the locker. The foot in the cafeteria. The soda on his hoodie. The hit that dropped red, the girl calling him violent. Coach Bennett's question. Did the fight change anything? Back then, he hadn't known how to answer. Now, sitting under the dim lights of a quiet gym, he realized the truth. The fight in the parking lot didn't change them. It changed him. Not because of the punch, not because of the fear in their eyes, but because it forced him to decide what kind of strength he wanted to carry. Not strength that looked for chances to explode. Not strength that lived only in his fists, but strength that chose when to stand his ground and when to walk away, and what to stand for in the first place. He picked up his bag and headed toward the exit. Outside, the night was cool and still. The town that once felt like a snow globe now felt different. Not safer, not perfect, but less like a place closing in on him and more like a place he could slowly carefully claim a piece of. He walked home under yellow streetlights, his steps steady, his mind clearer than it had been in a long time. Maybe people would always judge first and ask questions later. Maybe some would always see only what they wanted to see. But that wasn't something he could control. What he could control was simple. His choices, his reaction, his story. And whether he let one moment define his life or allowed himself to grow past it. If you've ever been pushed, misjudged, or forced into a corner, you already know that feeling. That tightness in your chest when people talk like they've already decided who you are. That heat in your blood when someone pushes just a little too far. So ask yourself this: when that moment comes, or if it already has, what will you fight for? Will you fight just to prove you're dangerous? Or will you fight to prove you're more than the story they've written for you? Think about the times you had to stand your ground. Think about the times you walked away. Which one took more strength? Because real strength isn't just in the punch you throw. It's in the person you choose to become after the dust settles.